Small businesses account for 1.5 million jobs annually and drive about 44% of the economic activity in the United States. Main Street is as critical to the American economy, maybe even more so than Wall Street. But research shows that Black Americans comprise approximately 14% of the U.S. population, yet only 2.3% of owners of employer firms. Black entrepreneurs are 20% less likely to fund their startups with bank business loans, but are instead more likely to rely on expensive personal credit card debt and family savings. More than 75% of Black and Hispanic women business owners cite lack of access to capital as a crucial barrier to their success. And additionally, the pandemic wreaked havoc on businesses globally as COVID-related issues reduced demand, increased costs, and created numerous supply chain issues. While all small businesses were impacted, Black and minority-owned businesses were the most devastated by the pandemic's effects. But the participants in our next session are working to lift up historically underserved small businesses through a powerful new partnership to help provide them the funding they need. So who are these people? Well, please welcome to the stage from Goldman Sachs, head of the Southeast region, Dase, and the co-founders of Now, Lara Hodgson and Stacey Abrams.
Thank you. Well, we are excited to spend some time with you while the judges are deliberating. And what we want to talk about today is the role that fintech, and in particular payments, can play in helping historically underserved businesses. So I thought what we would do, this is going to be a bit of a fireside chat, although there is no fire. I thought we would start by just introducing ourselves and maybe share some thoughts on how the fintech industry is perhaps uniquely positioned to play a role in leveling the playing field. Dave, you want to go first?
Sure. Great to be here. It's an honor to be on stage with Stacey and Lara, so excited, and hopefully this will be a good session. I'd say from fintech, I mean, look, I think it's like technology in a lot of ways. It's disruptive, it can disintermediate, and just by the sheer nature of that, it can level the playing field, because I think done properly, it can give access, it can give exposure, it can give education, it can give, quite frankly, access to capital. And so the ability to take some of the friction in terms of delivery of services, content, education, capital to people who are in most need of it, I think can be really, really helpful. And I think that education goes both ways. I think it can educate people who are historically underserved. We'll spend a lot of time talking about Black women and the impact in the economy and the underrepresentation of that, some of the potential ways to close that gap, or at least we at Goldman Sachs think about potential ways to close some of that gap. But it's really just, I think it's democratization and access which is most powerful.
Stacey?
So Lara and I started several companies together, and what we learned, and I think what led us to fintech as a solution, as David described, there's a gap. I would say there's often a chasm, and fintech is a bridge. It connects you to data, it connects you to opportunities, it connects you to capital, but it also lets you realize you're not an island, that you're not in this alone. And so often when you are in an underserved community of business owners, you feel like the mistakes you're making are yours alone, that the challenges you have are unique to you, and it's your fault for not knowing better. And I think what FinTech does is, and I love the fact that you use democratization, it democratizes failure. It lets you understand that it's not just you, that others have the same challenges. And then it offers you an opportunity to not only solve your problem, but then serve other communities and populate that answer very quickly. FinTech is one of the few ways to provide solutions without diluting the utility of that solution. You don't have to have the same person answering every question, because FinTech lets you replicate and amplify the solution across communities.
You know, when you talk about democratizing failures, Stacey and I sort of fell into FinTech, quite frankly, because our other business was growing so quickly, we were growing to death. And people would often look at us and say, neither of you are bankers. How in the world did you end up in this industry? But I think there's probably not another industry that touches every human on the planet. So by its very nature, it democratizes access, because while every human on the planet might not borrow money, every human does engage in commerce, right? They engage in some sort of transaction to buy and sell goods and services. And so I also think there's an opportunity within this industry not only to serve small businesses that are traditionally underserved, but this industry has the opportunity from an employment base to represent the larger population as well. And I think that's an exciting opportunity, but also a huge responsibility. So Stacey, as you think about, you know, you play so many different roles that allow you to look from a very high level, but you've also been in the weeds with me as we've struggled to get our own business paid and find solutions. Where do you think are the areas to really move the needle? Like, are there certain areas where if we all work together in this room, we could really make a difference?
I think the first place is understanding the success we've actually had. And that is not, it is not the greatest success by any means, but even that small success is under attack. The work of acknowledging the deficits in the capital markets, the challenge of understanding the lack of access to information and opportunity has been mitigated a great deal because FinTech has this capacity, and that is under attack right now. There is a very strong intention to stop in its tracks the very elevation of diversity, equity, and inclusion as a way to monitor and deliver solutions. And we have to remember, this is access to the American dream. It is how people get there. And so I think one way we can do it is just believe in what we've been doing. There is a retrenchment that's happening right now, and I think this community should stand firm and say, no, what we're doing is right. It's not only right for our morals, it's right for our pocketbooks. I think the second is that we have to amplify the solutions that we have, but we have to invite more questions. There is a tendency to think that when you found an answer, it is the answer. And we have to continue to be inquisitive and willing to be chastised, but also willing to have someone sharpen our thinking. And then I think the third opportunity is where we convene in this way, when we come together. The fact that this was preceded by entrepreneurs who are pitching. For the people who don't get the money, make sure they get your cards. Make sure they know that not winning does not mean they've lost. It just means that the progress they were hoping for wasn't quite as far as they were going to get. But we have this mentality that is either success or failure, and I tend to believe in a very public way that failing is simply an opportunity to seek another path. But we've got to popularize that and support that with real, discernible, and I think active engagement with those who don't get everything they need the first time out, but get enough that they know they can keep trying.
Well, and so, you know, Dave, you're very active with Engage, obviously Goldman Sachs. You know, a lot of the folks here, like those that were just pitching, are just getting started. They have ideas. They're trying to sort of get some traction. How can they better work with larger organizations like a Goldman Sachs? And tell us a little bit about some of the programs that Goldman Sachs is doing, like 1 Million Black Women. To Stacey's point, we make progress and then we retrench. And a lot of that follows the economy, quite frankly. How do we and how have you seen Goldman sort of not retrench, right? Like really stick to a goal and persevere through good and bad economies?
All right. There's some irony in that question, given some of the press on us recently.
Yeah.
But I will go to the specifics of the question. Look, I think as entrepreneurs or people building businesses, I like to think of it as kind of fail fast, right? And so get to the crux of the issue. And I think it's very easy to spend time trying to devise the perfect product or the perfect outcome or the perfect business. And the reality is nobody ever knows, and whatever you start with, it's probably not going to be close to whatever it ultimately can be or what's going to be successful. And so I think having a broad ecosystem, a broad feedback loop, and people you really trust to give you real honest feedback, and I think you got to listen to that feedback. In terms of how to interact, maybe we can come back to the kind of the Goldman question, maybe go to 1 million black women. But Goldman in March of 2021 announced 1 million black women. This was really consistent with a thesis we've had for quite some time. We have a 10,000 small business program, which has been around for a decade, 10,000 women program that's been around for a decade, and announced 1 million black women. And the goal here, or the commitment here, is to invest $10 billion of capital, $10 billion of capital in 1 million women over a period of time. It also is a commitment to give $100 million of philanthropic capital, and it really touches on the themes that Stacey was talking about, just in terms of this massive, gap, chasm, in terms of black women and where they sit from an economic perspective, from a health perspective, from a housing perspective, from an education perspective, relative to other peer groups, out there in society. And you talked about it being an economic issue. It's a massive, massive economic issue. It's a moral issue for sure, and we can talk about that for a lot here. But it's a massive economic issue, and so we are all in on this issue, and we're quite frankly really, really excited about it. And so it's multidimensional. Now Account, it's a perfect example, right? And what we're really kind of looking for is trying to find platforms where you can have a relationship with a company like Now Account, and then it can impact an entire group of people or ecosystem of people, and so such that you can get a multiplier effect in terms of that capital. And so we've over the course of the last 2 years, we've committed $2.3 billion in terms of invested capital. We've made donations, philanthropic donations of close to $30 million of capital, and the goal is certainly to get to $10 billion and get to $100 million. That's 137 different organizations. We believe it's touched close to 200,000 black women already, and we're, quite frankly, I think there's some good progress, but we're really excited, and quite honestly, there's a lot of hard work, and there's just a massive, massive need now. And so we would, welcome ideas. We're very, broad-based. We've 4 or 5 different investments in the Atlanta-based area, and 2 or 3 philanthropic donations in the Atlanta or Georgia area. And so we'd certainly love engagement from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, when we met the folks in the 1 Million Black Women program in New York, I was amazed at sort of the open-mindedness. So it wasn't sort of, we know how we want to do it, we just need you to do it. It really was this kind of help us think about how we can move these large amounts of dollars into the community in a variety of ways. So, I mean, that's a challenge for everyone in this room to think about what role do you play in this payments or fintech ecosystem, and what role can you play to level the playing field, to elevate those that aren't elevated, because we all play a role, right? It's not just the role of policy to do it. It's not just the role of a Goldman program, but if we can work together, it's amazing what we can do. One of the things
Sorry to cut you off. I was just going to mention on this that Goldman put out a research report in March of 2021 called Black Womenomics. It's got an amazing amount of statistics in it, and it really just drives to this issue. And so if you haven't seen it or looked at it, it's a really, really high quality piece of work, and it's the impetus behind this program, which has been really, really good. And then back to the economic issue, right? Our research department thinks that done properly in terms of deployment of this capital, it could create 1.2 million jobs for black women, and the economic GDP growth on that is just massive. They believe it's several $100 billion over kind of the near to medium term here. And so again, it does go back. It's a moral issue, but it's absolutely an economic issue, and it's an opportunity issue as well.
Yeah. And Stacey, I know you're working on some new projects in and around energy, in and around supplier diversity. Talk about how some of these areas that we may not view as the center of fintech, but quite frankly are enabled by fintech, can make a difference.
Thank you. So one of the projects I'm working on is with a company called Rewiring America. It's looking at the energy economy from the perspective of consumers and residential consumers in particular. 42% of carbon emissions come from the home, so that's the way you wash your clothes and dry your clothes, the way you heat your home, cool your home, what you drive, what you cook with. And the Inflation Reduction Act moved $8.8 billion to consumers to help them electrify. So it's not saying you have to throw anything away. It's saying as you want to upgrade, if you want to reduce your cost, we will help you do it. And as we think about all the money that's poured through the economy because of the IRA, we know that just in terms of the commercial side, it's $278 billion, 272 projects, 44 states, and 170,000 jobs. That's just, so every time you hear about a new plant that's going up that's funded by the IRA, that's the commercial side. On the residential side, we're talking about 1 billion new pieces of equipment, 1 billion new appliances that need to be absorbed, 1.2 million jobs that need to be created to install those new appliances. Someone's got to come in, install the heat pump, put in the new stove, put in the EV charger, put in your solar panels. These are, they're known as, they're green jobs, they're also pink collar jobs. These are jobs that women, that people of color should have access to and currently don't. And if they do, they're so far down on the economic ladder that they make the least amount for this. And so part of the work I'm doing is thinking about how do we use this as a point of elevation? How do we use the fintech space to say to someone, instead of becoming a worker for one of these companies, why don't you start your own company? You're going to know it's households near where you live who need this access, who are going to need this new equipment. And so part of what I'm working on is how do we build that energy platform that is very, very much centered on low to moderate income communities, especially communities of color, and particularly women. On the other side, because of the work that Lara and I have done together, when we launched Now Account together, I took a little bit of a detour, did some other stuff with my life. And when I applied for this other job, didn't get it, it happens. So went back to serve on the advisory board of the company that Lara and I started together, Now Account. And through that process, we started another entity. It was a project called Now Network, because we had all this data. We have all of these customers who've used Now Accounts to improve their cash flow. We know which small businesses have the ability to take on these contracts that David's helping push into the marketplace. The issue is they don't know where the contracts are. And the companies that want to let those contracts don't have an efficient way to find them. And so we were thinking we have the ability to create this network. Well, Lara is busy growing the behemoth that is Now Account, and so I'm actually in the process of trying to buy from her Now Network, which is the technology that we built, and it is another fintech solution. If you think about the equation, it's data plus capacity plus connections equals commerce. And so the goal is how do we increase the minority supplier diversity channel by making sure that the small businesses who could benefit from these contracts know about those contracts, that the buyers who want to get connected have an efficient way to connect, and that the ability to do both pieces are underwritten by the kind of capital that Goldman is putting into the work that Now Account is doing, and that's Now Network. And so after that, I'm taking a nap.
Well, and I love how you said data plus capacity, what was the formula? Plus connections. Dave, talk a little bit about the ecosystem here in Atlanta, whether it's through the Engage program, et cetera. We are trying to stitch that together, right? We're trying to bring together data and connections and capacity to help underserved and under-resourced businesses step up. What can the folks in this room do to further that?
That's good. It's a good question. I mean, one, I've been here in Atlanta now for 5 or 6 years, and I've been blown away by this effort, citywide, business-wide, public sector-wide to really try to drive more startup connectivity, more startup capital, more startup ideas. The education system, in Atlanta is just, it's massive. It's really, really impressive, and I think it's an incredible, competitive advantage to this market for a whole bunch of reasons. But I think the ability to start companies, I think those of you who have had some success or do have pockets of capital inside large organizations that can invest, I think it's all about investing. I think it's all about success. And just the more you can get this flywheel going from a startup community perspective, just the faster it's going to go. It's been a rough kind of 12, 18, 24 months in all sorts of capital raising markets, and that's from venture all the way up to the largest private equity firms in the world. But that's going to turn, and that will turn. And so I think keep working hard. For those of you who are entrepreneurs, I think just keep grinding at it, because you got to keep going. And as Stacey and Lara have talked about, the path to success or an incredibly successful company isn't, it's not always a straight line.
No, it's not. One other thing I would say too, if you're not aware, it's an interesting program that Mayor Dickens launched with Invest Atlanta earlier this year, and it's called ATL in Business. Because one of the things that he recognized is we all often say we want to help minority businesses, we want to help women-owned businesses, and we talk about, we'll give them some coaching, we'll give them some, but at the end of the day, what you really need to do is give them money. I mean, the coaching's great, but one way to do that is to buy things from them. And we can all do that. Every single business in this room buys things, right? And so you can buy those things from local small businesses. So Mayor Dickens actually launched, it's called ATL in Business, and it's a program that is encouraging other businesses and governments to buy local. So think about it. As consumers, we've all seen the buy local programs that want you to go to the local coffee shop instead of the national retailer, but nobody's ever done it for B2B. And I think Mayor Dickens and Invest Atlanta with Dr. Clementich have started a platform. So I would encourage everyone here to go on the platform, join the platform. It's free. You can build a profile and start buying things from your neighbors, from your other small business owners.
And Lara, before you move on, can you talk a little bit about the role that Now Account has played in helping really put a lens on the challenges of small businesses when it comes to capital, especially women-owned and minority-owned businesses? I know it's a softball question because I know what the answer is, but I think it's important to understand how transformative the work that you've been able to continue through Now Account has been to solving the problems we're talking about.
Yeah. I think there's this concept, and I'm hoping that Atlanta becomes the owner of this concept of inclusive entrepreneurship. And when you say that, people initially think gender, race, age, but there's another level of inclusivity that very few places have, and you and I experienced it with our last company. When Stacey and I had started Nourish, it was a patented spill-proof bottled water for children. And I remember us going down to some of the incubators, talking to investors, and across the board what we heard is, you're not a high-tech startup. No, we use technology, everyone does, but there was this sort of suggestion that we were second-class entrepreneurs. And I think without knowing it, sometimes we treat entrepreneurs as second-class if it's not the flavor of the month. It's not fintech, or it's not edutech, or it's not insurtech. Or we treat people as a second-class entrepreneur if they're not venture-backed, because that's sexy. And I think we have to stop that, because by doing that, when we discount certain classes of entrepreneurs as being somehow less impressive, we're really discouraging women and minorities from starting businesses. And so I do think there's this idea of inclusiveness. So when Stacey and I went through that, trying to grow our spill-proof bottled water company, now mind you, we actually had someone say you can't build wealth with a beverage company. We are in Atlanta. I think we can all see the shadow of the Coca-Cola tower. I think you can build wealth with a beverage company. And at the time, Stacey and I didn't really have anywhere to go. And so we cobbled together some friends around lunch who offered to put in the money to build the mold. And we realized that starting the business wasn't actually that hard. We started the business pretty easily. Scaling it was incredibly difficult because after we stopped selling to just little boutique stores and we started selling to Whole Foods, they didn't pay when we delivered the product, right? I mean, net 30 is a suggestion. It does not mean you're going to get paid in 30 days. You could just write net, pay me when you feel like it. And that was our experience. And most businesses that go through that either grow out of business, which we didn't want to do, or they stop growing by choice. Because you can't take an invoice, you can't take a purchase order if you can't deliver. So when we created Now Account, it was really out of necessity because everyone wanted us to get a line of credit or go try factoring, but we couldn't sign, I had a new baby in the house. I was not signing a personal guarantee. Stacey was caring for her aging parents. And so we were not in a position to avail ourselves of the typical financial tools, and we just said there had to be a better way. So I think what I've learned with Now Account, we've now processed almost 950 million in transactions. We ended the year with our big announcement that we closed a large facility with Goldman Sachs. And I think what keeps me going every day is every day, without fail, I get an email or a phone call from a woman-owned business, a veteran-owned business, a minority-owned business, a small business that says, I can finally take that contract, I can finally make payroll, I can sleep at night. And really, small was never intended to be a permanent status. The fact that you are a small business is supposed to be one point in time, not permanent. And so I think what I've learned is the resilience of small business owners is incredible. And if the people in this room can challenge the way that it's always been done and offer different ways to do it, these entrepreneurs can change the world. And we're the enablers, right? That's our role, is the enabler. So,
Laura, I was just going to follow up on that and say, I mean, I think 75, 80% of black women, Hispanic women who start businesses, this access to capital is a massive, massive issue. And I don't mean to call it friction, but it's enormous friction. It's demotivating. It's, you don't know where to go. You don't know how to solve it. And so now other companies like it and everything which you in the room can do, it's oxygen to the system, and it's the multiplier effect on what can get done is just fantastic because it gives the entrepreneur back their business, right? The opportunity to run their business and do what they want to do, as opposed to
the cost of doing business should not be your business.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. Well said. Well said.
Well, and when you said that, I started to chuckle because I remember Stacey and I sitting in a room and someone said, well, just go get friends and family money. We were like, you must not know our friends or family, but we would love to meet yours. And sort of this assumption that we all are born with this incredibly wealthy network of friends and family is an assumption that's just quite simply not true. Now, Stacey and I will talk to anybody, so we're good at building networks. But, again, it is friction. And I think sometimes people sort of minimize it as, oh, you just have to get over it, right? But we have to pave the way for that. Were you going to?
I was just going to add, and then we'll go Stacey. And remember, many of these, if not most, don't have access to a traditional banking system or a traditional access to capital type system. And so it needs innovation, it needs disruption, it needs, quite frankly, to be completely rethought. And so companies like Now are doing that, and hopefully many, many others are as well. But it's not, if you don't get it here, you're not going to get it somewhere else. All the doors are closed. The data would show, and I think the personal experience would show. And so it's about opening those doors.
And just to emphasize something you said, Lara, about the second-class citizenship of the type of business. One of the solutions that FinTech presents is that, this goes back to the very first thing you said, David, it's the ability to expand who has access without having to be constrained by the traditional barriers to capital. FinTech can solve the problem of treating with equality and equity businesses by saying, we don't care what you've been told you are, we're going to show you what you can be. And that's the innovation that's embedded in the FinTech space. That's the innovation that's in the South. That is why there is Synovus. That is why we have been able to build a reputation in Georgia and in the South for being the heart of fintech. But part of the evolution of our leadership has to be that we also see who got left behind in the last wave of opportunity. Our ability to not reach back, because that's patronizing, but to open the door and say, come on in, that's where fintech can really lead the charge, because we can undercut the theories that say this type of business or this type of owner is not valuable. We can instead say this idea matters, and if we don't understand the idea, if someone else does and you can show us that, we're willing to partner with you to make it so. And that capacity for fintech is just such a game changer that it can transform an entire economy. And back to David's point, yes, I said it was moral. It is moral, it is economic, because it's a circle, it's a cycle. If you do not have the ability to make the best decisions because of the economic pressures and stresses that you face, then you will not have the ability to make the future that you need, and everyone suffers or everyone rises with us. And so I just want us to really emphasize how important this audience is to that possibility, because we can do more because we're not constrained by what has been done before.
All right, so I see we just have a minute left. Do we want to offer a parting challenge?
I'm done.
She's already dropped the mic. She's done. Dave, any parting challenge for the audience? I like to end by giving you homework.
Look, I think the challenge is make a difference, right? And I think it can mean different things to different people in different parts of the business. But there's so much need out there, so much engagement, and many of you either sit in entrepreneurial type places, seats where you can make a difference with the companies you're building, or many of you have worked for larger corporations who have an ability to make a difference. And so I think inside those large corporations, I think it's a great moment in time to be loud, be noisy, advocate, and really, really push hard for those companies to try to make a difference.
And my challenge would be buy something from a minority-owned, women-owned, black woman-owned business in the next month. You're all buying things. And also offer your friends and family, because not everybody has them. But friends and family can be shared. And so if you're not in a position to invest in a business or buy something from a business, you do have resources. It's your relationships. It's that connectivity that Stacey mentioned. So if you have friends and family that are helpful, offer to share them with others who don't have them.
Thank you, Lara.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Please give them a round of applause. Thank you all very much.